This week on Forward, Jules and I discuss independent voters, what I meant to say on Bill Maher but didn't, Meta, Amazon, TikTok, Twitter, all of the tech companies. This week on Forward. And we are back. I am unfired.
And you have a haircut.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for noticing, Jules. I appreciate it. I do get those every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Got back from LA where I did Bill Maher. What did you think? How'd I do?
I thought it was really cool. I'm not an avid Bill Maher watcher, but I loved the panel discussion. So,
Well, that's good because
Yeah.
that's what I was a part of.
yes, it was very good.
You know, I will say, okay, so I'll just have some fun with this. The best part of being there was that I really bonded with the other panelists and guests. So we were all staying at the same hotel. I had drinks with them afterwards. Really fun. And that actually has happened to me a number of times on Bill's show, where I connected with John McWhorter on the
Mhm.
show. I've connected with different people who are co-panelists on the show. It used to be that Bill would host a cocktail party for everyone every week, where there's like a cast party, and then friends of the show would just show up. Now they stopped doing that with COVID. Sad. But the vibe was really positive. There were a couple of things I will confess to you that I wanted to get in that I wasn't able to get in.
Yeah, they were kind of shorter segments.
They were shorter
Yeah.
segments because it got consumed by the Oscars. The
Oh,
Oscars
mhm.
aftermath. There's a lot on that. So I did talk about radicalization due to automation as connected to the loss of manufacturing jobs.
Yep.
But I wanted to make a point about greater empathy for boys and men as supplementing that, where it seemed to me that framing everything as like a zero-sum game between genders is a disaster, and that helping women helps men, helping men helps women, particularly when we're talking about boys and girls.
Yep. Cohesive relationship.
Yeah, but the conversation didn't really take that turn because he kind of talked about men relatively perfunctorily, in part because he knew I wanted to talk about it, and so I didn't want to all of a sudden start going down like this logical chain. So I kind of hit the automation radicalization point.
And who were the other two panelists? It was Laura Cotis, who was an author, and then
Laura Coates, who's a CNN legal analyst, and then the other person is Nicole Perlroth, is a cybersecurity reporter
Mhm.
For the New York Times, and she had all this very fascinating information about our vulnerabilities. So that's what the one-on-one segment was about. Both of them are great backstage.
Yeah, the two questions that you guys covered was, do you think Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, is taking too long to press criminal charges related to January 6th? The other conversation was more so about Judge Jackson nomination for Supreme Court and everything that kind of goes along with that. But for the January 6th hearings, the House Select Committee investigation is coming up. What are your predictions? Do you think anything's going to come from that?
I have low expectations,
Yeah.
Honestly. So to the extent that something happens, I'd be positively surprised.
I completely agree. And then, like, the most interesting discussion there was that the initial election, of course, is always the primary election, but specifically this coming election amongst the Republican Party is going to be major. And they were pressing you about who you think is going to be running in the Republican Party. But we see a lot of unenthused, of course, Democrats, which was discussed, mostly because
Yeah, there's a 17-point enthusiasm gap
Yes.
between Republicans and Democrats right now.
that was crazy. So all eyes are going to be on the Republican Party.
And the last time the gap was this big, I think 60 seats swung hands.
Yes.
And right now the Democratic majority, I want to say, is something like 10 seats.
I feel like for young voters, too, this is very overwhelming because if you're a registered Democrat and you're kind of just observing what's happening within the Republican Party, how do you see that playing out within the Republican Party? And people maybe who aren't Trump loyalists, how they can kind of make moves there.
I mean, that's part of this, too, is that the Democrats ran against Trump for 4 years.
Yep.
Sort of reasonably. He was the president. And then now Republicans are running against Biden and the Democrats.
Mhm.
And it's very hard for Biden and the Democrats to run against Trump because Trump's nowhere on the ballot.
Yes.
People are generally very, very upset about what's going on in the country. inflation being probably the biggest day-to-day problem. So we all expect Republicans to have a very, very good November, and the enthusiasm is much higher among Republicans than Democrats. So, I think that's going to be borne out. I mean, it's going to be a very tough cycle, and so the question really is, where does that go in 24? In my
Yeah.
opinion, like I feel like 22 is essentially written. Not to say, I mean, we'll still be involved in various races in 22 and try and make a difference in heck. I mean, there's some primaries coming up too in June.
Hmm.
And as anyone who follows this podcast knows, like a lot of the action is in the primaries because the generals are so uncompetitive.
Yep. So for you, thinking about like 2020 and how you coming in and to hype you up was so different for young people. First of all, you were kind of the first candidate who really talked about tech, and it was also the first candidate who really, you didn't seem like a party loyalist by any means. And
Oh, good.
yes, maybe that's a biased opinion, but I think also just seeing these unenthused Democrats, it seems the perfect opportunity for something new to come in, something that's exciting. At the end of the day, there's a lot of ties between entertainment and politics, unfortunately. And it often feels like right now that people are kind of taking a step back from all the craziness that's happened within the 2020 election, and that something new and exciting needs to come in. So how do you see even like with this craziness within the Republican Party and who is going to win there? How do you see a third party coming in?
Exciting Republican who's going to run against Trump, or the new
Yeah.
exciting third party? Which one is it, or both?
Kind of both. It's just more so the unenthused Democrat voters. There's going to be a lot of attention on the Republican Party, like we just discussed, but it's kind of the perfect entry for a third party. And how you came in so strong within the 2020 election, basically a complete outsider. How do you see a third party coming in with a strong impact and honestly getting a lot of young voters who, we can talk about this too, there's a ton of young independent voters.
Well, so this is the question, Jules, which is, so whenever anyone thinks third party, what they think of is presidential.
Yep.
And in some ways that's logical because that's what they are familiar with.
Yes.
They remember maybe, I don't know who they remember. I mean, maybe it's Ralph Nader or Perot if they're a little bit older. And that's because when third party candidates run locally, you never hear about them, and it's almost impossible for them to compete. Now, so that this is the quandary that we're in, which is that you'd like third party candidates to be able to compete in more environments, but it turns out their greatest opportunity is the presidential or national, because you have enough resources where someone could potentially get a message out that's not contained within either of the two parties. Now, a lot of folks look at that and also say, well, the stakes are much higher in the national because in this case, let's say if you were to run third party, you might increase the chances of Trump winning, something along those lines. So I agree with your premise that there's going to be something new that emerges. And the question is it within the Republican primary?
Yep.
And I think there's a good chance that something new is going to emerge in the Republican primary. Is it enough to upset the dynamics and defeat Trump? TBD. I'm somewhat skeptical because I think both the Republican primary electorate and the energy of this time will favor Trump significantly. And I have talked to your point about Bill Maher asking me questions about this. I have talked to people who are considering running as Republicans for president of the United States, and they're making the same evaluation I'm describing, which is like, hey, is there a path to victory in the Republican primary? The folks that I can clearly see running in the Republican primary are people that, frankly, are willing to accept low prospects for victory.
Yeah.
Perhaps someone like Chris Christie, who's like, I have nothing to lose. Like, let's just do this thing.
Let's just do this.
Like, is someone like that going to run? Totally. The major question is like, will there be a figure like a Ron DeSantis or Larry Hogan who is much more political capital to both compete against Trump, but also more to lose?
Yeah.
Will there be a new, younger figure like a Will Hurd, who we had on the podcast? So that's variable one, is that will there be a new figure from within the Republican primary field? Number two is, will there be a Democratic primary? And if so, will there be someone new that emerges there? And then number three is like maybe they come from outside of the two parties as an independent via the Forward Party or a unity ticket. One of the fun things about being Andrew Yang during this time is that to the extent that there's anyone in any of these categories, they're interested in talking to me because they think I can help. They think I can help with young people in particular.
Yeah, for sure.
They know I have very, very relevant experience, probably more relevant than just about anyone else in the country, because like, you know, I'm one of the few people who's been through a version of this process.
Yeah.
So it's been fun because I talk to them and I get a sense of them. Some of them I like a lot and are genuine to me, patriots or someone who just want to do something positive. When I was coy, when Bill asked, it's like, oh snap! Like, how many of these people have I talked to that actually like I'm allowed to divulge?
Yeah, they were really trying to pick at you, like, let us know.
And, you know, and the answer is, you know, I guess, you know, I can't divulge any of them because, you know, like none of them have made any plans. And even to me, it's not like they tell me like, hey, I'm doing this thing like that. They'll say something like, I'm seriously considering. So, you know, what are you necessarily going to
Nothing
do
confirmed,
with that anyway?
100%.
Do
Yeah.
that anyway. Right now, to me, the major variable is whether Joe decides to run for president again and whether there is a Democratic primary. Kamala certainly does not clear the field. So the things I'm hearing from people are that that Joe apparently wants to run again. So there's that. There are people around him that are less enthusiastic, but there are also some signs of health issues, shall we say, that might make it such that
For
he's
sure.
not necessarily going to run. And that's, I mean, let me say on the record, I hope that Joe does not run again. I think he may choose to run again because he feels he's the only one that can defeat Trump. If Trump becomes the Republican nominee, I think the odds of Joe running again go up because Joe will say like, I'm the only one who can defeat Trump. I've done it once. But I just don't think it's good for the country for us to have an 82-year-old president being sworn in. And if you do have an 82-year-old president being sworn in, then this time, you know, like we should frankly expect him not to complete his term and to have a vice president who we're essentially electing president. Which is that really the play? I mean, maybe. I mean, if there was a vice, but even
Never ideal.
Yeah, and then this is a tough thing to say out loud, but it's like it'd be very hard for Joe to be like, hey, I'm going to run again, and my vice president pick is not going to be Kamala Harris because I can sense that a lot of you are concerned about her being the next president. So it's very hard for him to make a change there. But it is also the case that Kamala polls poorly, and I think if that were the ticket, then people would look and say we're essentially electing Kamala.
DeSantis is interesting because what I observe on social media, he seems to have a similar like rallying behind him, not to the extent of Trump, but there's like on a smaller scale, a similar energy, not by no means as kind of toxic as the Trump era, but he's someone who, if was running against Trump, I would see be like the strongest prospect. Do you
He's
think
the strongest prospect?
Yeah. Do you think he's going to move forward with that? If a lot of people predict he will run against Trump, why would you think he wouldn't?
One, I heard he was telling donors a little while ago that he's not going to run against Trump. So
Okay.
it could be that he changed his mind. I mean,
Yes,
you know.
straight up answer. that's a pretty straight up answer. Yeah. Okay.
Well, the other thing is you look at it just from a risk reward. Iran's pretty young.
Yes.
If he sits this one out, then he's still the heir apparent coming in next time, and then he'd be, you know, the savior, and he can wait a cycle. You know, it's like his downsides to running against Trump are really potentially significant because then it's a war for the base. Trump is excellent at painting someone in a negative light.
For sure.
So it's just the risk reward doesn't seem to work. Though I will quote a Republican that I respect and I agree with. He said that anyone who says that they won't run against Trump shouldn't ever be president, because if you ever want to be president, then you're not as like calculating about it. You're just like, look, I think country needs me. I'm ready to go. Let's do it.
Yep.
Instead of being a political calculation, be like, yeah, I'll sit this one out because you know, I don't want to go to war with Trump. I liked that perspective.
Yeah. Wait, that's very interesting, actually.
But you know, we're talking about politicians. Like, do they think like that? No, I mean, they do think very much in terms of their political fortunes. I think the smart political thing for Ron to do is just to sit it out.
Do you know you get a different Netflix depending on which country you're streaming from? So Netflix literally hides thousands of shows and movies from you based on your location. Now you could get mad about this because they're increasing their prices, and so you could cancel your subscription in protest, or you could be smart about it and get ExpressVPN like we do. So you may not know that what's on Netflix in your country is completely different from someone in the UK or Japan and what they have on theirs. If you use ExpressVPN, you can control which country you want Netflix to think you're in. So ExpressVPN has over 90 countries to choose from. So every time I run out of stuff to watch, I just change my country up and I can switch to another country and unlock new shows. And here's the best part, it's not just for Netflix. You can use ExpressVPN to unlock a show on other streaming services too, Hulu or Apple TV or you name it. ExpressVPN is also super fast and works on your phone, laptop, even smart TVs. So you can watch your shows on big screens with zero buffering. So here's the deal. We want you to stop paying full price for streaming services that don't give you all the shows they have. Get your money's worth at expressvpn.com/yang. Don't forget to use our link so you can get 3 extra months of ExpressVPN free. That's expressvpn.com/yang. expressvpn.com/yang.
Also, something with the Bill Maher conversation that I found really interesting because they were such short segments, you didn't get really to elaborate on, but you guys were talking.
Yes, give me an
Yeah,
hour on
yes,
each. Now go
I know,
ahead.
no, but like this was so interesting. So you guys were talking about how like Judge Jackson was under a ton of scrutiny for defending people, but she was a public defender. You know, she was assigned these
Defender.
things,
Yeah.
and you were talking about how America is so polarized. You're just on a team, and I really want to talk about that more because if a rule goes against your team, you ignore it or write it off. And I want you kind of to elaborate on that because I think there's a huge discussion there amongst young people in independent politics regarding especially social media today, and how it just intensifies every aspect of human nature. And that's a huge aspect of human nature that we're seeing unfold over the past few years.
Oh yeah, I think people who are arguing for principle and the rule of law like are just more and more getting drowned out by people who look at that stuff and be like, wait a minute, it's like just everyone seems more and more hypocritical
Mm-hmm.
nowadays. It's like tougher and tougher. I get that. I think for young people too. When I was campaigning for president, I would say this to young people. I'd be like, look, like we've set your generation up with a bill of goods, and if I were you, I'd be very angry or very sad. And I apologize on behalf of everyone who came before you that we're leaving you such an awful mess. So if that's young people's experience, which I think is pretty fair, and then be like, hey, but follow the rules.
Yes.
Then it's like, there's a little bit like, well, should I be following these rules you speaketh of? Because, like you haven't exactly set us up for good things. And there's like this very, very thin network of institutions trying to keep like the rules in place. And then we can see the rules are being broken all around us. I mean, I could use the first thing that popped into my mind was actually crypto. It's like,
First thing,
it's
crypto
like
bro.
crypto is just breaking all the rules in various ways. And you look at it and be like, well, wait a minute, like like what do we like? What does this mean? What do we do here? I think it's one reason why third party politics would be so interesting to young people. I think I saw something where 70% don't really like either the Democratic or the Republican
Yep.
Party. Now, it could be that this group may just not be very into parties in general, but I believe that there is a massive need to be filled there. Both the Democratic and Republican Party are just really old in the tooth, kind of like aged establishment brands. Like I'd love for there to be like this new, fresh, awesome type of politics that includes young people and they feel like they're a part of and can take ownership of. That maybe gets us away from this like this tit for tat back and forth. I'm not even back and forth. My sense of things around young people. I should ask you this, is that I don't think that that folks who have, let's say, liberal or progressive views are necessarily like clashing with like their counterparts on the other side on a daily basis. I think it's more that there's like this consistent set of messaging that goes in a particular direction.
It's kind of
And
own worlds,
yeah,
basically.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like you've got like an echo chamber going.
Yes.
And then there are people who are within that echo chamber that are like, like maybe I don't agree with like that, or maybe we like
For
little,
sure.
little far, like a little like that's my sense that that there are a lot of people who just don't feel included.
So, yeah, as of 2019, just over a third of Gen Z would consider themselves to be politically independent, and there was about 10 to 12% that just didn't say they were independent or Democrat or Republican. But a big thing that comes towards young people who do talk about independent politics on social media is a lot of a big left-wing term is this enlightened centrist term, and always aligning, identifying as an independent with being a centrist. On the record, can you explain the difference there?
Yeah, I think independent to me is like, look, I don't fall within party orthodoxy
Yes.
on like all these policies. Centrist is like a bit more kind of wishy-washy with like whatever direction you want to take. I would split it down the middle. And independents come in all shapes and sizes and beliefs and everything else. So imagining that all independents are centrists or moderates, I don't think is correct. I work with some people who are very, very left, like very, very, very left, who consider themselves independents. I know a lot of libertarians who consider themselves independents, who are, probably you'd think on the other side of the spectrum, which I think the spectrum's overblown. Even me, it's like, it was interesting about me too, Jules, that like I had a vision that would be a significant departure from the way we're doing things. And some people thought it's like, oh, like it seems awfully quote unquote progressive, even though I never like
outright said that. Yeah.
Like I would, it's like it, like, would it help people who don't have a lot? Yes. Like, in my mind, that's kind of the goal. But I've concluded that you're not going to be able to get those things done. And this is something I've thought a fair amount about because, I have a lot of friends who are in the, like what you'd consider the left lane, the progressive camp.
Yep.
And what they do, and in my opinion, we're aligned on our desires for a lot of good things to happen. Now, their plan is to take over the Democratic Party and then like make all these good things happen. I see two massive problems with that plan. Number one, I don't think taking over the Democratic Party is actually in the cards because there's like this massive entrenched set of interests that are going to want to keep the Democratic Party in a particular lane, and the media is part of it and the rest of it. So that stuff you can probably figure out. A lot of corruption baked in, honestly, a lot of entrenched interests. And the second thing is, I don't think the Democratic Party is going to be in a position to be able to make big things happen for quite some time. Like you have to see right now, this is the high watermark of Democratic power for at least a while. Very, very lucky to get a 50-50 split in the Senate, turns out. So you've got like two massive problems if you're trying to make things happen, big things happen. There are other structural problems too. Like now we have these cascading deficits and inflation's out of control, and some of the things you want to do like would require spending money, which I'm much more open to than like a lot of folks. So that there are all these structural problems, and so to me, like the smart thing to do at this point would be to try and reorient American politics and have like not this two-party system that I do not think will deliver for anyone. The only thing it's going to deliver is madness.
Yeah, we're seeing that.
so that's like but I mean anyone who takes a look at my latest book, the goals I have are the same as they've been. I think now, like I see the path as being very different politically than I would have imagined it. And for me, this is like learning and adaptation,
Yeah, well, this was like fascinating to me. It was also around 2019. A study by Pew Research is that basically there's just a movement from Gen Z Democrats and Republicans coming to a more unified stance on politics. So even on issues like 52% of Gen Z Republicans want the government to be more involved in solving social issues, compared to only 23% of boomers within the Republican Party. So even just within the party, there's these crazy generational differences. Also, only 18% of Gen Z Republicans believe that humans are not intensifying climate change, while it was 42% of boomers, for example. Just these crazy differences within the party that it does feel more like these generational changes, why like these Gen Z people in the Republican Party or Gen Z people in the Democratic Party aren't even aligning on the same things. Like you said, actually on Bill Maher, it's more so just a team. People a lot of the times can't even break down what does this party stand for anymore. It's truly just an ideology at this point, and it's just an energy that you flock to that causes a ton of polarization online, because as soon as you hear Democrat or as soon as you hear Republican, you are just boxing that person into a certain energy and just not at all like considering what they're saying, and when in reality there's a very unified stance on the issues.
Yeah, that's so profound. Where if
Yeah.
you talk to a young Republican, they want to help fight climate change and make positive social things happen, and are okay with having the government be a part of that. So if you can try and build those bridges and make common ground as opposed to just getting separated into these tribes, then you can make real progress. That's why the reorientation is so important. Young people, join us. Make it. Let's make it happen. So the thing that I commented to someone earlier is that at this point, no matter what you're for, like this system's not going to give it to you. You know what I mean? Like if again,
Yeah.
unless it's madness. So
Seriously.
but I think for young people to participate in the reorganization of our politics is a must. Like if you're a young person listening to this, do you really think that it's going to be the Democratic Party, the Republican Party is going to like solve some of these problems that are getting worse and worse and have been for decades under their watch? The fact is that neither party pays a real long-term meaningful price for either the problems getting worse or even losing a race, because it just the ball goes back and forth between the two of them.
Polarization is just busy work.
You need genuine competition. You need more third parties, and you've been conditioned. Everyone's been conditioned to be like, "Oh, third parties can't work." And then you ask yourself, "Well, why is that?" It's all because the two parties shut them out of every major, like poll or race in these districts. So we have to evolve to ranked choice voting and nonpartisan open primaries. Give everyone a shot. New parties would emerge. Young people would have a better chance at leadership. It'd be great.
Yeah, because you also point out the UK has 5 parties, Germany has 7 parties, Sweden has 8 parties. And so if one party goes crazy, let's say whether it's either Republicans or Democrats, it's not an existential threat to the entire system. And I think it's just crazy we don't, like, you've definitely touched on it before, but we don't talk about enough how even George Washington was considered an independent and actively spoke against the two-party system. That's rarely ever talked about in schools. And just that point alone, like, I'm like, that's epic. And the fact that we don't talk about that foundation that was set for the country and how it completely went the opposite direction.
Way away. The founding fathers
Yeah.
would look up and be like, "You guys are real idiots to have
Yeah.
this bizarro duopoly in place."
Bizarre.
No, it's true.
No, seriously.
Or the other thing that another great American president, Abraham Lincoln, won the White House with 39.8% of the vote in a 4-candidate race. He was essentially a third-party candidate
Yep.
on the brand new Republican Party that had just materialized as a northern anti-slavery party. So when you think about, like, in our nation's history, some of our greatest leaders, like, they wouldn't be like Democrat, Republican. And when he ran for office again, he had a unity ticket where he was the Republican presidential candidate, and the vice president was a Democrat.
Yes.
So, can you imagine these things happening today? Like the greatest leaders in the country's history would be shocked at where we are right now.
And it's also like Trump really took over the term the silent majority during 2020, which was originally coined by Richard Nixon, but Trump kind of made it seem more aligned with the Republican Party. The real silent majority to me, yes, are young independents. That takes up a huge margin of the voters and young people. And these are the people who don't feel like they can speak up a lot online, because what does well in algorithms are these extreme takes that provoke extreme emotions, whether they are good or bad, and kind of, this middle ground take isn't what algorithms are. It's not feeding into them.
That's one reason why you're so important, Jules.
Thank you.
Making the middle ground. Jules Turpak. Follow her on your favorite social media
All these
platforms.
plugs. All these plugs. But to me, it's just what we see online is kids are online more hours per day than they're honestly conversating with people in person. And so what the parties seem like online, the Democratic Party, the words that align and you don't have to agree, are kind of woke and idealist, and the Republican Party is often seems like conspiracy theorist and often devil's advocate. So the Republican Party online, the extremists, often like whatever the left is saying, will oppose it completely, no matter how much it aligns with them. Because in the reality, like I was saying earlier, we see a more unified stance on politics amongst young people. It's just not being represented online. But when that's all you're being fed through the algorithms, it can seem like everyone's on these extreme sides, but it's a small percent of voters that are truly on the extreme. So it's been evident, like we said, George Washington made it obvious that he didn't believe in a two-party system, and social media and these algorithms just further intensify, again, what happens in human nature. And it's just clear right now that this two-party system is not what we need at all, and it's just how we're avoiding everything that we need to get done because of this bickering back and forth. Like I said a few minutes ago, it just feels like busy work, and we're not actually talking about things we need to get done. It's just this tribalism back and forth.
Yeah, I completely agree. And let me say too, like I like some of the things that various Democrats have proposed in Congress over this past period. If you ask me who I line up with more, like right now, the Republican Party doesn't even have a platform last I checked. But this system is really just like, it's not working for anybody. So that's one of the real lessons that I've taken from this past period of time. And I do think we're in the, final, whatever it is, 7 months of, 7 months of Democrats having control of government. I mean, nothing's going to get done starting in November. And our institutional trust and credibility is just, dropping. It's fun trying to build the next generation of institution sometimes. I mean, it's like I'm someone who I'm saddened by the state of the country and the state of the world. But like it's great being able to work with people like you and try and give folks a home.
I also feel, just again, because what we see online, a lot of young people feel like it's easy to tune out of the current political system because it feels like it doesn't suit you or doesn't support you. Things like open primaries are an obvious thing in the short term and also the long term to continue to root for, especially for young voters who are these independents. Like, what are things like open primaries and aside from it that you can actively be pushing for?
Ranked choice voting would be the biggest win.
Yes.
It's like an anti-extremism change in voting. It also gets rid of the spoiler effect. The entire, like, you're going to ruin it. It's like, well, it's all ranked choice voting if you really care. And the fact is, most people of both parties, Democrats and Republicans, don't like competition. It's one reason why 90% of seats are now gerrymandered to be uncompetitive. So then you say, hey, ranked choice voting, it allows new perspectives to emerge. Like, no one's like, oh, sign me up. I mean, people are like, sign me up, but Democrats and Republicans in power are not like, sign me up, because if you're an elected official that won in a given system, you don't want the system to change. If you're a consultant, it's like, oh, this introduces uncertainty. So this is up to people, like the folks listening to this, to say, look, ranked choice voting is a win. It's a win for everyone. It's a win for the public. The only people that it's not a win for are extremists.
Exactly. Well, we don't want them to win anymore. They've had their time over the past few decades.
How is your stress level? Mine is never particularly great. And people don't always realize that physical symptoms like headaches and teeth grinding and even digestive issues can be indicators of stress. And let's not forget about doom scrolling, sleeping too little, sleeping too much, undereating or overeating. These are all stress stuff. Now, I'm proud to say that this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. And I've used BetterHelp personally a bunch of different ways in terms of what I'm coping with. But stress is a big one, because it shows up in so many different ways. And in a world that's telling you to do more or sleep less and grind more, this is a friendly reminder to take care of yourself. And BetterHelp has online therapists and personal counseling sessions that you can talk about anything online 24/7. It's amazing. So how it works, you go online, get matched with a therapist that's right for you, and you get access to them via text or video chat whenever you want at your convenience. And you can do it as many times a month as you like. It is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, so you can give it a try and see how online therapy can help lower your stress. So this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Forward podcast listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com betterhelp.com/yang. So that's betterhelp.com/yang.
This all kind of ties into something that the Washington Post actually covered last week regarding Meta, Facebook, paid a GOP firm to demean TikTok. So
They went after you, Jules.
yeah, they went after me. Honestly, it's okay, and we can talk about that. But it's interesting because Mark Zuckerberg was often like critiqued by the Washington Post throughout this article too. It's like, what side is he on? He donated to a ton of Democratic politicians.
Is he a Democrat or
yeah,
Republican?
so is he a Republican? But reality is, who knows? Most people don't really know at the end of the day.
Mark Zuckerberg is what's called a Zuckerbergian.
Yeah. For himself, for sure.
He's a
for himself.
He's a, like a meta booster.
Yeah, so Facebook, parent company Meta, is paying one of the biggest Republican consulting firms in the country called Targeted Victory to orchestrate a nationwide campaign seeking to turn the public against TikTok. And this was actually pretty crazy work by Taylor Lorenz, because a lot of journalists today aren't really actually on the platform or they'll browse it. This is something she had to be on the platform often to really identify. So it was months ago. She realized that in like local newspapers that Meta, well, she didn't know it was Meta at the time, but there were these stories planted about TikTok regarding trends like slap a teacher trend. And schools were literally being shut down because of these trends and these scares. And she realized, like, this is not a trend on TikTok. There was maybe one viral video, and that doesn't constitute a trend. There's not thousands of videos with it. So she started following this and was able to figure out that just talking to local newspapers, and also Meta was planting like op-eds with Targeted Victory about the platform. And mostly because TikTok is Meta's biggest competitor. We've talked about in past podcasts that the entire Gen Z demographic is moving over to that platform. Instagram recently lost active users for the first time ever, mostly Gen Zers. And kind of just, Zuckerberg going to great lengths in order to put Meta on top has been crazy.
Yeah, that's really messed up.
A little bit. And Taylor was talking about that you see this a lot in politics, but never before really in the social media realm with business. So
if I had won the White House, I was going to go to war with Zuckerberg, truly, because what's good for Facebook, I'm going to call it Facebook.
Oh, yeah. Don't give him that respect.
What's good for Facebook is not good for America. It's not good for humanity. It's not good for sanity. So I spoke to a political scientist, Barbara Walter, a few weeks ago on the podcast, and she said that Facebook is essentially negative correlated with functioning democracy around the world.
Oh, for
I don't know
sure.
if you saw that, where it's like if Facebook shows up in a country, then they backslide.
Direct correlation.
It's literally like an anti-democracy company. So I was going to go to war with Zuckerberg and the gang. They don't have any interest at heart except for Meta's profitability and Zuckerberg's increasingly dissociated view of the future.
Oh, for sure.
Where I've heard that he just hangs out in the metaverse more than he hangs out in the real world. And look, like I'm as big a fan of aspects of virtual worlds as anyone else, but I'm going to suggest that that's probably not healthy. Mm-hmm. So I hope they pay a price for this. But the problem is here. I mean, there's so many problems, but here.
Yeah, we could talk about this for 2 hours.
But so it's like, what price could Meta, Facebook, Zuckerberg pay? Like, you would need a functioning government.
Yeah.
You need someone to be like, okay, like this is beyond the pale. It sounds like Taylor Lorenz really freaking hunted this stuff down too.
Yeah, crazy good story. Seriously.
Yeah, nice journalism.
Yeah.
Number one, people would be like, oh, everyone should just stop using them. It's like, well, these social media platforms are essentially
ingrained in our lives.
All, so it's like abandoning them. Now, personally, I'm not against you abandoning them, honestly. Everybody. So if you log off, I mean, that's fine, but it's unrealistic for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. It's unrealistic for any business because you have to try and reach people. So that's not a thing. And then it'd be like government action, but our government, when they do bring these social media leaders in, they yell at them about things that are unrelated to, their kind of anti-competitive practices. I mean, they're quasi-monopolies. So So the fact is, Facebook can play fast and loose in this way, and I mean we've seen it over and over again. They'll just keep on doing things that are beyond the pale, and they don't pay a meaningful price.
Completely. And so their biggest thing was that employees within the firm, Targeted Victory, worked
You know, to the extent there is a price being paid right now,
what?
it's that a lot of cool people don't want to work at Facebook anymore.
That is true. That is true. Very true. And so their biggest target during these articles was mostly so these trends kind of just painting TikTok as, a bad player in the game, because they often feel like they get unfair press. And in regards to us talking right now, like, yeah, there definitely is kind of a focus on Meta, Facebook, Instagram, and these social media conversations, especially regarding youth well-being. They're definitely a main target amongst Congress and everyone. So they kind of want to paint someone else in a different light. And you see lately Zuckerberg has been making a lot of independent media appearances, which he had never, ever done before. He's been
weird.
on very odd, very like calculated. It's been like in the past 2 months, 3 or 4 of them back. And before, never has he
just show up
ever.
on a podcast.
He would get
Yeah,
on
that's
like
weird.
Good Morning America here and there, but obviously that's super high production and everything. And these were pretty high produced as well, though Lex Fridman claimed that there was no like censoring beforehand, that they didn't look over the questions or anything like that. But I will say, so their focus in regards to criticizing TikTok was in regards to China and selling a lot of these kids' data and all of that being obtained by China. But what's interesting to me, and I actually did a video on this a week and a half ago, and I don't know how this got pushed on the TikTok platform. So it was me criticizing TikTok on the TikTok platform, which sounds contradictory, but we can go into why I did that. And it's sitting around like 800K views right now. And the video was about how kids focus today, much in part due to all social media, but TikTok's the holy grail of this, is just completely declining. And you actually had an interview with the author of Stolen Focus, which was really good, and I suggest people go listen to that too. But the biggest problem really is, the immediate short-term effect of TikTok is this complete stolen focus. And this device you have in your hand is basically a paradox of choice device, where whatever you're doing, you feel like something can be more stimulating to you on an app like TikTok because it is so well curated to you, and it's a bottomless feed. Unlike any other platform before, that feed is completely bottomless. But let's say, and it's really rewiring kids' brains, and I could go on about this for an hour. That's the real problem. But let's say TikTok gets shut down. These other platforms, we're still in the attention economy, and Meta is trying to copy that with Reels, and YouTube is trying to copy that with Shorts. That's the real immediate problem, and all these platforms are trying to do the same thing, and then some with virtual reality and everything like that. So they're going to this data angle, but it's clear, I mean, obvious it's for business intentions, but
it'd be one thing if Facebook was all of a sudden doing all of these like massive remediation measures themselves.
Yes.
But they're not.
No, not at all. Not at all. And then Wall Street Journal actually posted a piece on Saturday, and it was TikTok Brain Explained, why some kids seem hooked on social video feeds. It was going into a lot of what I talked about in the video as well. And I just want to read this intro because I think it's really powerful. So it's like, remember the good old days when kids just watched YouTube all day? Now that they binge on 15-second TikToks, those YouTube clips seem like PBS documentaries. Many parents tell me their kids can't sit through feature-length films anymore because to them, movies feel painfully slow. Others have observed their kids struggling to focus on homework and reading a book. Forget about it. What is happening to kids' brains, and then goes into like the ADHD conversations. And this article is also super fascinating on the topic. I got worried about this Facebook Meta coverage about demeaning TikTok because, it puts a lot of focus then back on Meta. And there are a lot of things to critique about TikTok. And I noticed on my video then that was getting a lot of traction and response, that a lot of positive response of kids being like, I'm getting off this app for today. This was like a reality check, and it's true. I'm deleting this app for the week. I need a break. But then I started to see comments after this article came out a few days after of like, oh, was this planted by Meta or something? So then it kind of also takes responsibility again back off of TikTok, when in reality there needs to be a lot of discussion about how it's rewiring kids' brains, and we need kids to be able to focus in order to make change in the future. And like, people need to have like a long-term focus and vision. A lot of the times now when you say, oh, in the future, I want this to happen, whether it's within change or like independent politics, a lot of people are like, oh, like next year? No, like the future can be like a 5 to 10 year timeline, and like you have to work continuously at something to be able to actually achieve it. And we're seeing a lot of that being lost within kids right now.
Yeah, someone said to me this week that they think that it's going to be up to Gen X to fix all these tech issues, and the argument was that Gen X actually remembers a time before the technology and then remembers the time after technology.
For sure.
And so we're not Luddites, but we actually do remember the time before. And I said, wow, and I thought of the Gen Xers I know who were running for office. It's bad though, like that. There are other societies that have taken much more protective measures, but here in the U.S., we just have so little faith in government that we just throw any restriction on as freedom of speech. Let's say, here's an example, something that I would recommend.
Yes, let's hear it, please.
Is that I would say, hey, if you're under 18, your social media apps don't work between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m.
For sure.
8 hours without it.
Yeah, because China's doing that, and it's like a collective experience. Because right now, when kids, if you're a parent and you tell your kid, oh, you can't have your phone after 9 p.m., there's this like FOMO feeling, fear
Everyone
of
else is
missing
on,
out.
but if no one's on, then you're not missing anything.
You're like, yeah, am I missing something? What are my friends doing? Social media stuff is breaking out left and right, like breaking news, and it is like a fear of missing out. I feel that at the age of 24, like
So I'm looking at you.
Wait, what'd you say?
No, I'm just looking at you like you feel like missing out at the age of 24, which is, I mean, we all feel that.
Because you're
standing in line and you're just like, oh, what's going on in the world?
Yeah,
you can't just stand in line.
It's a very exhilarating collective experience when like news is breaking. Even this morning, and we can talk about like Elon Musk and Twitter. It was cool to see everyone's reactions in time and like how shocking it was. And it's maybe not as stimulating if you're a day or two late. Like stuff like that, it can feel like you're missing out on. Especially in the worlds we're in, where you kind of like want to hop on and be knowing things like as they're happening. And a lot of people are kind of critiquing, oh, well, TikTok's like inserting 10-minute videos onto their feeds. Those, I've seen people try to do those. They're not doing well. The platform is not built for 10-minute videos. It's crazy. So to the point of what you're saying, yeah, the hours, and we've discussed this before, but I think it's really important for everyone to know, because a lot of people write it off because, oh, China's doing it. China's just as intimidated by their tech companies as the U.S. is about our big tech companies.
Yeah, and that's one of the tough things too. It's like, China does some very, very bad things.
Yes.
But just because China makes a policy decision doesn't automatically mean it's like the wrong one.
Exactly.
It's like, let's say they get 20% of them right, 80% of them wrong. You'd still look at it and be like, well, which one is this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I did coverage on like the 4 things that China's doing for kids on Douyin, which is TikTok's equivalent in the country. People just wrote it off because it was China. They're just like, oh, I'm not doing that. And just to quickly add for everyone else, the 4 things that China is doing for kids.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so it's from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Kids under 16, it's not 18, aren't allowed on the app. So it just like they just don't have access to the app. I think it's like 15 to 20 videos. There's a 5 to 10 second pause, kind of get them out of that hypnosis that is so easy to get into on TikTok.
Reasonable.
Of course, like, duh. If you're on the app for more than 40 minutes straight, kicks you off. I don't know the duration for how long it kicks you off, but you get kicked off. That seems reasonable. 40 minutes straight on a social media app, not really a need. And the other thing is, so in America, the algorithm is very catered to your subconscious mind and your interests. Anything you're giving watch time to, whether it's good or bad, the algorithm just really caters to exactly what you give watch time to. In China, they're infiltrating that a little bit, not in a bad way. But to kids under 16, I'm not sure how it is for adults. Th're pushing more edutainment STEM content. So, fun
just throwing
learning
in a couple
content.
physics equations.
Yeah. And right now on TikTok, and the Wall Street Journal actually did a video series on this like a year or two ago. They made like a couple thousand bots on the app and kind of gave them different interests and assigned them those interests. And when videos would come up with those certain hashtags, would watch those videos longer. One of the bots, they aren't people yet. One of the bots had like an interest of depression and like sadness. After just like 45 minutes, the algorithm figured it out. And like every 2 videos were like a depressing video. The that's like what some kids are living in. I remember when I was on Tumblr in middle school, so dramatic. My Tumblr name was like finding color in this black and white world, something like that.
Poor young Jules.
Yeah, like no reason to be sad, but Tumblr, like anyone who's on that app knows that it was the first app to really like romanticize mental illness and like really made kids like put it on themselves. But it was, of course, not to the extent of TikTok. There wasn't a crazy algorithm. It was just based on who you followed and like what you curated yourself. TikTok's just feeding you this content nonstop. And I can't imagine so many kids when you're exploring your identity and like, you know, sad boy hours, just being dramatic, like you could have nothing wrong in your life. And it's just, exploring that side of life. And these algorithms can just like completely rewire your brain to make you believe a certain thing. It's insane.
Well, Jules, I'm so glad that you're digging into these issues because for a lot of older people, TikTok is, you know, a bit of a mystery.
Oh, it's for sure definitely a mystery, but it's crazy that I think the average time spent on it is like 3 to 4 hours a day for kids. That's a huge chunk of your day.
It is hypnotic. I mean, I don't spend time on
it. I was like, are you spending?
I spent, so, okay. I mean, people probably know this. My experience with the TikTok is making TikTok videos because my team was like, oh, this would be a good idea.
Yeah, it's where people are.
Yeah. So I've done it. So I watched enough videos to be like, wow, this is, well, so I remember like Twitter Vines over and over again is what I think of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it is hypnotic. I'm proud to say I have not actually spent more than 5 minutes on the
wow, that's impressive.
Thank you Andrew Yang for president.
Seriously?
The willpower to resist, the hypnosis.
Yes
This is the kind of leadership you need.
Facts. No, but it's crazy and it seems contradicting. Why'd you post
TikTok video about
on TikTok? It is where kids are and there's no potential reach like that app. And I advise everyone go watch that video and see the comment section. Like everyone was just like I needed to see this on this app. There's no other way people would have probably seen that unless it was YouTube.
That's smart.
Yeah. I mean, it can seem contradicting at face value, but it was just crazy to see how people were reacting to it too and talking about their own experience with they were used to love watching documentaries and now they can't even get through a movie or a TV show without checking their phone every 5 minutes. Like just this weird like subconscious pull to just like swipe a few times on TikTok.
I confess, and this is something, I'm making me sound a little bit like a fuddy-duddy, but I'm kind of grateful I came of age when I did. And then now that all this stuff has come online, now I'm, like a dad and chilling.
Yes. No, I think that's important because even me, like social media didn't come around till middle school. And so I do still feel like I remember life before then. And like even like my millennial aged friends, like they decently know what life was like before them. They were on MySpace, but it's just a completely different type of social media. And it's just scary because kids don't know anything else now. And and there's just this crazy digital footprint. You see a lot of family channels now and these kids who are being forced to have their identity on social media. Even it's just like when my mom posts pictures of me, sometimes I'm like, Mom, like ask me. Like this is like online. Like it used to seem like chill and only your friends and family could see it, but it all adds up.
Come on, Mom. Jules is famous now.
Oh, no. Not to that extent, but I'm like...
Come on.
Like, there's this whole stereotype. Everyone
There's a brand to protect here.
No.
I'm kidding.
It's a whole stereotype of, like, the ugliest pictures of you are on your parents' Facebook. Like, that's where they live all the time. But it adds up, and we're already seeing this compounding digital footprint of people. We've seen it in the past with cancel culture a few years back, but kids are going to have, like, stuff from... they were like 5 years old online that their parents posting kids in like the bath and all this. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, this is not okay. Like, this is the internet and this is accessible to everyone. And it's crazy.
Wow. You got me fired up, Jules. I'll still take a shot at fixing this stuff
Please.
I mean, it has to emanate from DC, in my opinion.
Well, this was the first time Biden addressed it really in his State of the Union address. He talked about social media and youth well-being. His focus was a lot on advertisements, which it goes hand in hand with data. Of course, data is important in this, but data is not like a sexy thing that people like to talk about. Like when you hear that, there's kind of just like a disconnect. You tune out. You're like, okay, what does that even mean? That seems like such a large conversation. And in reality, he talked about advertising, but also kids don't really have buying power. You see advertisements on Nickelodeon growing up. You don't have a card. You can't really make moves on that.
It's part of the problem, but it's not the guts of it. I get it.
And the immediate, clear situation that's hitting kids in mental health is pretty obvious.
I guess we're inching in this direction. Nice job, Joe.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I was like really pleased to hear that was even a conversation. It was pretty prominent throughout that.
I have to say they fight so hard about any sentence in that State of the Union.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know if you all know that. But
probably super calculated, of course.
Yeah, it's the most valuable real estate where that like people are fighting to get a line, a sentence, and so anything that makes it in crowded out something else. It's actually a very positive sign.
Well, kind of back to this too with this article and how people were saying this is often something that's done within politics, kind of these planting of the seed articles. What has your experience been there? Kind of just like I feel like this was very interesting to young people to really see, wow, like this platform I'm on all the time that has a huge impact on my life is being targeted by this other platform I'm on all the time. And I think kind of that's not trivial by any means, but these things that are collective experiences help people really actualize that same action on a bigger scale. So like within politics, how have you seen that play out?
It did remind me of politics, to your point, where so candidates and campaigns plant negative stories about opponents all the time.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's like is the fact that Facebook then turned to Republican consulting to plant these stories about TikTok. It's like I guess that almost makes sense. The fact that it could get traced back to them. I mean, this is like a worst case scenario for them. It's like, oh no, we didn't want to get caught. But it's definitely commonplace in politics. I'd imagine it's not uncommon in business if you have a few big players. Like, are they playing mean against each other? Sure. I met Richard Branson a little while ago, and he was telling stories about how like the major when he started, Virgin airline, that like there aren't many airlines in the UK, and like the other airlines were doing like crazy stuff to stop him.
Really?
Like it was worse than planting negative stories. It was like just like all sorts of
brutal.
It was just brutal stuff. I mean, business is a very tough sport, but the fact that I think part of this story that's like if I think the intermediary that Facebook used is part of the problem. It's like hiring the Republican firm to trash. It just leaves TikTok. It leaves you with a very, very bad taste.
It's fascinating to me. Like I could just like look into this stuff for hours. But on another note, with social media today, we're recording on Monday. I'm not sure when this is dropping, probably Thursday. But it was announced that Elon Musk bought 9.2% of shares in Twitter. So a few weeks ago, a big tweet that he put out, and my laptop died, so I can't read it word for word, but was asking about Twitter's relationship with freedom of speech and if people feel like they are able to utilize their right there in a good way. I think it was people said no, like 70% of people believe that Twitter does not super align with freedom of speech, and only 30% agreed with so. And then Elon was talking to people on Twitter again about, do we need a new social media platform? That would be a pretty insane move. I remember when even TikTok came out, I think I was like, we are at our max with social media platforms. Like, what void is there to fill? Yes, freedom of speech is like
my
a void.
Joke is that the next social media platform, $1 trillion idea from Andrew Yang.
Oh gosh, don't give the startups your idea.
Here we go. It is Tick.
Like 3-second videos.
Yeah, just now it's 3 seconds.
Jesus. No, but yeah. Jeez. No, but like even a platform coming that kind of helps people exercise freedom of speech more. If it's the same exact
Truth Social is a total dud.
Yes, it's a total dud. And like people knew that from the start. Of course, Trump loyalists were running to the platform, and within like a week or something, people just stopped. The user base went.
Yeah, if you go into freaking empty bar, do you like stay there? You go to an empty
Yeah.
bar, you like turn around and leave.
Yeah, it's like you're getting tired of like, maybe it was a good moment. People being like, wow, this is kind of insane of us. Let's move back to where everyone else is. It's more fun. Collective experiences are more fun and with like people outside of this echo chamber. So maybe it was a good moment. Who knows? But yeah, like even Elon creating another platform, and he's someone who
Elon's
could.
not creating
No,
another
no,
social
he's
network.
not.
He just put out a question, I think.
Yeah, so
to mess around.
there's no way, but yeah, there's no way that's happening, and thank God that would have been a dumb move. But this is super interesting. I just find it fascinating. I want to hear your take as well.
You know, I've met Elon, met Jack Dorsey, and I genuinely think that this is a personal thing. Like I think that Elon and Jack had some convos, and then Elon decided to buy a stake in Twitter. It's passive. He doesn't have any. He's also, I can say very much that like Elon's totally overscheduled and has like other things on his mind.
Yeah, it's kind of just like a statement.
Yeah, like it seems like a massive investment, but for him, I mean, it's like 1% or so of his net worth. Like
But culturally, it's crazy.
Culturally, it's crazy. The fact is, Twitter, in terms of social media businesses, is not a great business. It's not. Its cultural impact is much higher than its economic
For sure.
impact. Heck, I mean, even like Jack Dorsey stepped away and is now running Square full time. And if you look at those two businesses, Square is a much bigger business, more significant too. And so I think this was a relationship thing personally.
Yeah. So I think Twitter, like I've said this for the past few years, I think Twitter's going to win like the long game with all these social media It's my favorite. Like there's a lot of bad on Twitter. Don't get me wrong. I'm not putting it on a pedestal, but it's been my favorite platform. And I think there's so many different use cases for it in terms of, I said this last podcast, but it's kind of what LinkedIn wishes it could be in terms of content.
Well, so I had the most singular set of Twitter experiences. So check it out. Imagine being like a relatively anonymous guy, ran for president of the United States, and then went from
powerful.
5,000 Twitter followers to 1.2 million Twitter followers over the course of, I don't know, like 15 months, 18 months, whatever it was. And so in that, 1.2 million people, were a lot of people who I had heard of, or in some cases was a fan of. And so when you see that stuff happen, so this is something that I will say, like it's probably relatively unique to me, because
can't relate,
because people are but like you just look up and be like, holy shit, like like Rivers Cuomo follows me on Twitter now. It's like the greatest thing ever. And then you'd be like, hey, what's up? And so I ended up meeting a lot of people this way.
Yes, it's crazy. Networking. Yeah.
And then people would hit me, like DM me, be like, hey, big fan. I'd be like, oh, that's so nice.
Like, geez, okay. Yes.
Yeah, so there was like something very, very utilitarian and powerful and positive. The folks who were part of the Yang Gang were connecting on Twitter all the time. And like I'd meet someone on Twitter and I'd see them at a rally or an event. It's like the greatest thing ever. So like, like I might have experienced some of the most positive aspects of Twitter. And when I was running for president and I was, between stops in Iowa, like I was looking for productive things to do. And so it was either use my phone to call people or use Twitter,
What's the option? Twitter?
I found Twitter to be, more fun because calling people, or not even calling people. I mean, you're calling people to ask for their endorsement.
Yes.
Or you're calling people for money, and neither of those things is that pleasant.
I mean, I keep using the word fascinating, but it's just because I love these social media culture conversations. And with Twitter, it's very interesting because when I was in middle school, it was a prominent platform aside with Instagram.
Everything I said, though, that said, I think Twitter's user base is shrinking. Is it or no?
No, I think it's been growing.
Has it?
Yeah. I think this year, yes, I'm pretty sure. I wish I could Google right now because my laptop said, I'm pretty sure this. Yes. Wait, can I make this point? Because it goes with that. So in high school, I would utilize Twitter. Same with my peers when I talk about this too. And in college, it's kind of like there were a few years where Twitter died out. And I noticed this in my younger siblings as well. It's kind of like you make a Twitter account. It's harder to navigate because it's not like Like Instagram, you follow your friends. TikTok, the content comes to you and you're following a lot of strangers. Twitter's a little harder to navigate when you first make a profile. But it's where, a lot of professionals are. And like as you get to the end of college and into early adulthood, you start to be more active on the platform. A lot of kids do use it for like a fandom culture and stands, like you love your favorite celebrities or like pop artists or whatever. But it becomes more prominent in like your early adulthood, and like I just keep seeing so many people flock back to it, and just again it becomes their favorite platform, like it kind of was in middle school when you used it more for humor reasons. It's like this weird cycle with Twitter, and like you go back to loving it, and it's just super great in like your adulthood. But to the point back to Elon and the talk about freedom of speech, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out and what his kind of hopes are in regards to Twitter and freedom of speech, because Mark Zuckerberg talked about this on the Lex Fridman podcast about, Lex Fridman grilled him about one of the biggest critiques is regarding freedom of speech. And Mark was like, what would you do? It's so easy to critique that conversation. There's a million different ways, but what would you do? And almost no one has an answer once you get asked that, because you can see, oh, this video got taken down. And a lot of these videos are taken down through AI. And even Mark Zuckerberg got grilled a few years ago in front of Congress because, content moderators were being paid a typical minimum wage, but they're sitting there all day watching.
Just looking at the worst of human nature and losing their minds. They're
Literally.
all like in therapy.
Literally. So a human should not have to do that. And so then you have to rely on AI. And of course, there's going to be flaws in that. And when you have these crazy clickbait headlines, whether it's on YouTube.
The stuff like I get frustrated when I hear Zuckerberg's response to stuff like that.
Yes.
It's like, look, you're making gajillions of dollars, and your approach to this is essentially, it's like, hey, we're going to try and curb the most rancid stuff. We have some countermeasures, like leave us alone. And then part of it's like, look, man, like you could do bigger things that probably hurt your bottom line. Like there should be like no. So the like what someone said is, it's like the algorithm should not be feeding into this stuff. Like you're profiting from a lot of these things and then complaining about it. It's like, just like turn the algorithms off and say that you're not, like you're not going to profit from content unless you're willing to stand by it. And then all of a sudden they'd be like, oh snap, like so it's like if you assume the current state of affairs, then you could be like, oh, like what's a person to do? But it's like, well, you're assuming all these things that are baked into your business model because they make you tons of money. Like if you were to draw this up from scratch, like you could do this in very dramatic ways. You would almost certainly make a lot less money. But it's funny. It's like they're willing to consider anything but those measures.
So do you think, when you say turn off the algorithms, because right now the algorithms to me on a lot of these platforms, especially TikTok, genuinely feel like it's just a reflection of your mind and like what you give attention to. And yes, humans tend to flock to kind of these extremes, happy and bad feelings. How do you see the algorithm? Like, what do you think?
Well, so because right now the algorithm is programmed to do one thing: maximize engagement.
Attention. Yeah.
It's just like, hey, how do I maximize your engagement? And then it's like, what? Like, well, you're paying attention. Like, I can't be blamed.
Yep.
And so you could easily temper that and just be like, hey, maybe we're not going to maximize engagement. Maybe we're going to maybe we'll actually make programming decisions. Maybe we'll take some responsibility. Maybe we'll do, it's like, it would make it probably a little bit less, or make it a lot less profitable, make it probably less entertaining and make it less addictive. There are like a lot of things you could do that make it less addictive. Anyway, I just feel like the what can we do response just assumes all these market conditions.
What gets interesting there to me though is like, when they're kind of making more tweaks with the algorithm in regards to maybe not perfectly aligning with the extremes that it does right now. I feel like almost it gets more nitty gritty into the lack of freedom of speech conversation if they're being more calculated about what type of content should be pushed more or shouldn't be pushed more, rather than, just what people give more eyes on. You know what I'm saying?
That is the point. So I think this is the thing that, that they're trying to run this balance, which I think at this point, it's like, look, man, it's ridiculous. Is that, it's like, look, we're not a publisher or a platform.
Yeah.
It's like we get control. It's like you say it. And then part of me is like, you're actually the biggest publisher in the history of the world.
Yes.
and you're the biggest publisher taking less responsibility. So, there are all of these rules of the road that I think could be followed, and does it end up then running into this strange zone of like, well, what's hate speech, what's not, what's obscenity, what's not, what's that threatening, what's not, and that's legitimate for them to be like, look, can't have random lowly paid human making that decision. We do have AI doing it. They screw up sometimes. People get mad. Like that. That's a very, very legitimate conversation.
Yeah, that's
and,
more
and,
so
and,
my
and even
focus.
and even like I've heard from heads of social media companies being like, look, I shouldn't be making this decision. And that's something that I sympathize with.
100%.
That's something where and for them, what they're doing, here's their problem. Their problem is like, look, we're not a public commons, we're a private company, we do whatever the hell we want, we don't even tell you about it, we're going to draw this line here, and then you're happy or unhappy, whatever, say la vie, no one can do anything. like that's the current state of affairs. What you'd want is you'd want them to actually open the kimono and be like, okay, here are the guidelines we're using, can someone improve on this in some way? Let's have like a consortium of government, NGOs, media companies, and tech figuring out like how we treat this in a way that doesn't drive people insane, doesn't like run afoul of this and that. But that's not something they want to do, because it's like, look, I'd rather just get criticized sometimes and keep it behind the kimono, because there's so much we don't ever find out about what's going on inside of Facebook and their algorithms because they don't share the data.
Yeah, it's a beast of a problem, because to your point there, we were talking about certain things are obvious for people to put off the platforms, whether it's violence or whatever, don't need to be seen on the platforms. It gets into the wishy-washy situations when it's like, can this provoke violence? Can this provoke mass hysteria? Yeah, and that's where it definitely gets messy, and it's going to be interesting to see how. Because I think Elon replied to someone, I don't necessarily agree with you on this piece of content, but I think deleting it is wrong. And of course that can be true in a lot of instances, but it gets wishy-washy, especially with all COVID, when things maybe weren't true initially and were suppressed on platforms or even deleted, and maybe certain things became true and little truths within, and people really ran with those as examples. Something I liked that platforms did were the warnings, so it wasn't deleting the content, but people could press on them. Reality is people became numb to those, and you weren't pressing on it and actually reading the content, so it's just a crazy tough problem to attack. I think that was a step in the right direction, though, not taking this content down, but we're going to put a warning here that, hey, these are some sources where you might want to flock to instead. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I got some warnings on my stuff when I was like celebrating various political races, and it was like,
really,
this race has not been called.
Oh,
I was like, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think it's like keywords or whatever. Yeah.
I was like, yeah, that race was over.
Like, dang. Yeah, people would run with that too. They're like, oh, my stuff got a warning. It's like, yeah, if you just put COVID, anything that says COVID gets a warning, no matter if it's for or against. Yeah, at least that's how it was on Instagram at a point. If like you put the words COVID in an Instagram story, there was a little warning at the bottom.
So our last discussion item is going to be this happy initiation of a union in Staten Island, Amazon warehouse, unionized, very, very brave. Thank you for doing this for all of us.
And also just someone over the past few years, so kind of the Starbucks union and all the press around that was the first. It just feels like there's this uprise in unions right now, and I would love to hear like your thoughts on this as well. I think a lot of young people are just getting into the workforce, and like the actual importance of unions is kind of something that people are confused about.
Yeah, unions are definitely making a comeback after like a multi-decade and a multi-generational even decline.
Yes.
There was I think writ large, there was a point when unions represented approximately, I think I want to say it's like 40% of the workforce, and then now it's down to like 20, or like it's gone down half or so. and unions gotten a bad rap. There are excesses associated with unions, but you know what else there are excesses associated with? Amazon.
A little bit, a little bit.
And so in the context of something like Amazon, then unions a pure good. Like the excesses in unions are, frankly, more like teachers unions and some other environments. In the corporate setting, workers are getting exploited uh, very, very consistently, and so people being able to come together is a huge win. There were massive pressures against the people who are trying to organize.
Yes.
So kudos to them for standing strong. I'm sure it won't be the last Amazon union, because now that other locations will look up and be like, wait, they actually did this in a place. And
Yeah.
I have a feeling they're
Empowered.
going to win some concessions as well. So there are going to be a lot of eyes on Staten Island and the Amazon Fulfillment Center there. I will say that I think Staten Island is an appropriate hotbed for this, because there are a lot of independent-minded people there who also benefit from unions. There are a lot of cops in Staten Island, a lot of people who are part of these orgs.
Yeah, and again, for kind of young people getting into the workforce, and this is very empowering in regards to the labor conversations around Amazon the past few years. What exactly is the relationship between like a union and the direct employer versus like a union and the government? Like, where does this coincide?
Well, I'm happy to
Yeah,
answer.
I need
Okay, so so
clarification.
so here's the thing. So there are various federal rules on the books around unions.
Okay.
They're not enforced very rigorously, unfortunately. I wish they were enforced more rigorously. But you can't be fired for trying to start a union, though I'm sure it happens all the time. Like, you can't be retaliated against. I'm sure it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Uh,
Loopholes.
and so if you satisfy certain standards, then you can qualify as a union, and then you can negotiate for wages, benefits, whatever you'd like under the sun. So that the legal framework is around allowing for organization and keeping employers from retaliating.
Okay.
Now, if you become a union, you then can connect with the Department of Labor, which is the official government agency that is meant to support labor and unions and everything else.
Okay. I just wanted that clarification because it's like I understand unions and their purpose within the employer, but I was a little bit confused about the government relationship there in regards
Yeah, the
to
government set up rules saying, hey, like, here are the rules around unionizing. You should be
yeah.
able to do so. Employers shouldn't be able to discriminate against you and fire you or make it more difficult. Though again, employers do it all the time. And it's very clear Amazon was doing it in this instance.
Yes.
And then if you succeed in unionizing, then there's a group of regulators. There's its own kind of legal tribunals. They're like the National Labor Relations Board is meant to adjudicate these kinds of issues. So there's like a whole legal regime that comes into effect.
And so Amazon spent, I know in the past year, was like 4.3 million trying to block this from happening.
Sure.
So what, for employers, what is the incentive? Of course, like it's just rooted in just not wanting to give the employees power.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's just like well, of course it's rooted in that, but it's like, are there any other things that really push them to spend that much money in blocking something like this?
Well, for Amazon would have spent a lot more than that if they thought they could do it, because it's like you look at their workforce around the country, it's in the hundreds of thousands. So if they were all to unionize. So I have some sense of the backdrops of this. So the union movement arose in the mid 20th century when manufacturing of automobiles and everything else became like major employer. People were getting exploited right and left, and unionizing was very, very difficult. Where like auto companies and others would send assassins to like kill union, like it was essentially war, like in the streets. Like there was a guy, Walter Reuther, who like got shot in the face at home for being a labor leader. So this stuff was very, very hard fought, very hard fought. And then when the unions won, it was like this massive culmination of this like movement, and they got like these laws in place. Labor was a massive force in American life. And then that time, like the things that I'm describing, probably completely alien to most people.
No, this is like, keep going, but I have a comment then.
Yeah, so labor, and again, there was a point when like something like 35 to 40% of all workers were represented by unions. So unions were the force. They negotiated 40-hour work weeks, benefits, all the stuff that a lot of people enjoy, like all these things.
I feel like we're about to go through this again, to be honest.
I mean, so I sincerely doubt it's going to, because like going from 40% to 20% of the population over the last number of decades is really significant. And like, can that reverse in this way? I'm dubious. I'm happy again that this union has formed, and I'm happy that there are various like environments where these things are happening. But there was like this incredible war, and the reason, there are some reasons I'm dubious now, and that like I think maybe I'm wrong. Like I was thinking that like the deck has gotten so stacked against workers that it'd just be like I think it's going to be, I'm supportive, but I'm not sure this is going to fix it. Sorry. So that's like the great arc. It's like there's this massive conflict. Unions became enshrined, and then have been declining for like a 60-year period. If you look at, for example, the Martin Luther King "I Have a Dream" speech,
Yep.
There were union leaders there with him. Like there were a lot of folks in the "I Have a Dream" speech. Like union leaders were hand in hand with the civil rights movement. The whole thing was like, very, very much like power to the people. And then like the last 60 years, 2 generations, it's gone the other direction enormously. Now, is there going to be a comeback? It seems like we're seeing something of a resurgence.
Yeah, and this is a preface for another conversation another day, because I think it's something we can talk about for a while. But yeah, we talked about last podcast, me and Zach, about this disconnect right now between education and the future of work. And I'm seeing a lot of like, younger millennials and Gen Z coming into the workforce.
Do you like what a student of history I am, Jules?
No, this is really interesting, because I just feel like that's like history repeats itself. And who knows? I know you might not believe the same, but I'm just seeing this clear uprise in how Gen Z is viewing work, and how even there was an article that came out yesterday. I think it might have been the Wall Street Journal again, about how young employees aren't doing cover letters, for example, like just completely skipping that part. And of course, we see with the Great Resignation, everything. There's just something cooking in regards to this disconnect between education and work, and also how the gig economy, passion economy, which I have my reservations about that, piping up. And in regards to if people do become more self-employed, of course, the healthcare system in its current form does not work for that type of system. And I feel like in the next, this decade, towards the end of it more so, we're going to see something very interesting in regards to labor conversations, because we talked about this earlier, that it seems like people are kind of tuning out maybe of the next election in terms of polarization. A lot of people are depleted, but this seems like something a lot of people are getting behind, are these labor and work conversations. I'm seeing more and more.
Well, you would know. Yeah. I mean, you have your finger on the pulse.
Yeah, I find it. Yeah.
It would be exciting. I'm all for folks organizing in certainly in organizations like Amazon. I mean, gosh, like they're ideal because they're made of money. They're super exploitative. A lot of people work for them. Like we all use them, but know that they could be doing more. So it's perfect.
Well, you spoke about 4-day work weeks too during your 2020 presidential campaign a bit.
Yeah, I'm all about trying to humanize workplaces and the rest of it. I really dislike exploitation, and there's a lot of it going on.
It's going to be interesting. We got, I think, a good future ahead, but there's going to be a lot of moments.
I'm so glad that you're like, a young optimist in that way, but also see things very, very clearly. I mean,
I don't know if I'm an optimist, but like
that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like, part of this entire this perspective is like we're kind of standing amidst these declining and crumbling institutions, and what comes next.
It'll be interesting, but I'm excited about it.
As long as you're excited, Jules, I'm excited too.
Yes. I think that's all we have today. I think we went over everything, right?
Yes, we did.
Awesome.
Have a great week, everyone.
Have a great week.